Yesterday, a federal judge in San Francisco looked at attorneys representing the Pentagon and said 5 words that will define what happens next in the relationship between intelligence systems and state power. She said the supply chain risk designation, a label the government historically reserves for foreign adversaries suspected of sabotage, quote, looks like an attempt to cripple Anthropic. Now that phrase, from the bench, in open court with both sides present, is not just commentary, it's a signal flare, and it arrived on the same day that $1 billion AI video deal evaporated without a single dollar changing hands, and a chip design firm held up the first piece of silicon it's ever manufactured in its modern history, and a 60-year-old diabetes pill turned out to have been quietly talking to your brain this entire time. Judge Rita Lynn didn't just express skepticism yesterday. She dismantled the government's position in real time, exchange by exchange, in a way that exposes the distance between what the Pentagon did and what it can legally justify. And here's the core of it. The supply chain risk designation is a narrow instrument. By design, it applies to defense procurement. It says, we don't want this vendor inside military systems. Fine, that's within the government's authority. But what actually happened went far beyond that. Defense Secretary Hegseth posted a directive on social media declaring that no military contractor could do any business with Anthropic, not just for defense work, but for anything. And then a presidential order extended the ban to every federal agency. Now, Lynn zeroed in on this. She asked the Justice Department's attorney, why did Hegseth post a directive he now says carries no legal force? The attorney said, quote, I don't know. That's the government's lawyer in a federal courtroom, unable to explain why the defense secretary did what he did. Lynn then pointed out the absurdity at the edges here. The National Endowment for the Arts using Claude to design its website would be prohibited under the scope of what was just ordered. An arts agency, barred from using a text tool because of a defense procurement designation. Now, here's what makes this case structurally important, not just for Anthropic, but for every intelligence system that will ever interact with government power. The government's remaining argument rests on what it calls future risk, the theoretical possibility that Anthropic could update Claude's behavior inside military systems in ways the Pentagon doesn't like. Anthropic filed sworn declarations establishing that this is technically impossible. Once Claude is deployed inside air-gapped military networks, the company cannot modify it. The government's attorney acknowledged he didn't know whether such modification was even feasible. So follow the logic here. The government designated an AI company a supply chain threat, a label for foreign adversaries, because of a capability the company does not have to modify a system inside networks the company cannot access after a contract negotiation that collapsed over bulk domestic surveillance the company refused to enable. As the Century Report covered on March 2nd, the Atlantic's reporting revealed that surveillance of Americans, not autonomous weapons, was the actual sticking point. Every legal argument that the government has made since then has to be read through that lens. A ruling is expected within days, and whatever Judge Lynn decides, the precedent reaches far beyond just one company. So here's the question being answered in that courtroom. Can the values embedded in an intelligence system, the things it won't do, the lines it won't cross, be treated as a national security vulnerability? Because if the answer is yes, then every AI company has to learn that same lesson. Build your system to do whatever the government asks or risk being labeled a threat. So if the answer is no, and yesterday's hearing strongly suggests no, then safety commitments become legally protected design choices. And that distinction shapes every AI deployment into government hands for years to come. Okay, completely different kind of story now, but it rhymes in a way that I didn't really expect. OpenAI killed Sora yesterday. Just ended it. The AI video generation app, the social platform, the TikTok-style feed of AI-generated clips are all gone. And along with it, the billion-dollar Disney licensing deal that was supposed to be a landmark moment for AI-generated media. And Disney confirmed, yes, the partnership is over. According to Reuters, no money ever changed hands between the two companies. So a billion-dollar deal that lasted 3 months and produced zero revenue for anyone. The numbers tell the collapse story very quickly. Sora peaked at 3.3 million downloads in November. By February, only 1.1 million. Total lifetime in-app purchases are about $2.1 million. For a company that burns through billions annually, that is a rounding error on a rounding error. But here's what actually killed it. It wasn't the download decline, it wasn't the revenue. It was the compute. Sora was consuming processing power the other teams inside OpenAI desperately needed. And weeks ago, Fidji Simo, who runs OpenAI's application division and recently got the title CEO of AGI deployment, told staff the company needed to stop being, quote, distracted by side quests. Sora was classified as a side quest. Now let that land for a second. A product with $1 billion Disney deal attached to it was labeled a side quest. The deeper lesson here isn't about one app failing. It's about what survives in this era versus what doesn't. Video generation as a capability isn't going away. The underlying Sora 2 model still lives inside ChatGPT's chat interface, and competitors like ByteDance and Google keep developing their own. What failed was wrapping that capability in a social media platform. The TikTok-style feed, the scroll and share format, the deepfake cameo feature. OpenAI borrowed the architecture of the attention economy and applied it to generative AI, and the result was a moderation catastrophe. Martin Luther King Jr. deepfakes, Mario smoking marijuana, things that generated headlines instead of engagement. Here's what I think the Sora close actually tells us. The social media playbook. Build a feed, capture attention, monetize the scroll. That playbook was designed for an era of content consumption. You watch, you swipe, you react. Generative AI is fundamentally about content creation. And when you give millions of people the ability to generate anything, and you wrap it in a platform designed to maximize engagement, then what you get isn't creative revolution. You get the worst impulses of the old internet, amplified by the most powerful creative tools ever built. Sora didn't fail because video generation doesn't matter. It failed because the container was wrong. The social media era's packaging couldn't hold the generative era's capabilities. Now, OpenAI simultaneously disclosed it raised another $10 billion, pushing recent fundraising past $120 billion. The company is consolidating around ChatGPT, Codex, autonomous research, and enterprise tools, capabilities that actually compound. That word keeps appearing, compound. The question every organization building intelligent systems is answering right now, whether they know it or not, is, does this capability compound, or does it just consume? Sora consumed. Now, that answer was expensive, but it did arrive fairly fast. All right, now for something structural that most people will miss, but you really shouldn't. ARM makes the invisible architecture of your life. The chip designs inside your phone, your tablet, your smart TV, your car's infotainment system, your wireless earbuds. There are roughly 3 ARM-based chips for every human being alive, but ARM has never in its modern history actually made a chip. It designs the blueprints and it licenses them. Apple, Nvidia, Qualcomm, Amazon, they take those blueprints and they build the silicon. But yesterday, CEO Rene Haas held up a physical processor and said ARM is in a new business. The AGI CPU, 136 cores, built on TSMC's 3 nanometer process, optimized specifically for AI inference. The workloads generated when AI systems don't just answer questions but take actions, spawn subtasks, and manage cascading operations autonomously. Now, Meta is the lead customer and co-development partner, planning to work across multiple chip generations. OpenAI, Cerebras, Cloudflare, SAP, and SK Telecom are also signed up. Production targets the second half of this year. The energy claim is the headline: double the performance per watt of competing x86 architectures from AMD and Intel. And in an era where data center power consumption is the binding constraint on AI expansion, where states are literally overturning nuclear bans to meet electricity demand, a chip that does twice the inference work per watt of electricity isn't just an incremental improvement. It is a structural advantage. But here's what's really happening at the industry level. The AI hardware landscape looked like a near monopoly 18 months ago. NVIDIA GPUs, and then everything else far behind. But look at it now. Meta builds custom silicon. Amazon has Trainium. Google has TPUs. NVIDIA launched the Vera Rubin platform. Cerebras has its wafer-scale chips. Gimlet Labs just raised $80 million to split workloads across every chip architecture simultaneously. And now ARM, the company whose designs already underpin all of it, enters as a direct manufacturer. The captured advantage of any single hardware provider is compressing toward zero. And this is not because these companies are failing, they're all growing, but because the demand for AI compute is so enormous that no single provider can contain it. The ecosystem is diversifying faster than any incumbent can lock it down. And that's what abundance looks like at the hardware layer. Not one winner, a proliferation of options so dense that the bottleneck shifts from who makes the chip to who integrates the system. Qualcomm, by the way, was conspicuously absent from the congratulatory messages yesterday. They recently won a court ruling against ARM over licensing terms. AMD and Intel are the direct competitive targets, so the politics of this will be messy, but the trajectory is clear. The physical substrate of AI is becoming too important, too varied, and too competitive for any single architecture to dominate. Last story for today, and this one, another quietly extraordinary one. Metformin. You probably know someone who takes it. Maybe you take it yourself. It is the most widely prescribed diabetes drug on Earth. Over 150 million prescriptions annually in the US alone, and it's been around for over 60 years. Doctors understood it to work primarily through the liver, reducing glucose production. But that understanding, after 60 years, has been proven incomplete. Researchers at Baylor College of Medicine discovered that metformin suppresses a protein called RAP1 in a specific region of the hypothalamus, a small area deep in the brain that regulates your metabolism. When they delivered metformin directly to the brains of diabetic mice, blood sugar dropped remarkably, at doses thousands of times lower than what oral treatment requires. Think about what that means. A drug that hundreds of millions of people swallow as a pill every morning has been, all along, doing something significant inside their brains at concentrations so low, nobody thought to look there. Now, the liver pathway is real. We know that, but it's not the whole story we know as well now. The brain responds to metformin at concentrations orders of magnitude below what the liver needs. The drug has had a secret second job this entire time. And here's where it gets really interesting. The Baylor team plans to investigate whether this same brain pathway explains some things doctors have been noticing for years, but couldn't explain. Metformin users seem to experience slower brain aging. If the RAP1 suppression mechanism in the hypothalamus connects to neuroprotection, it opens up an entirely new therapeutic target, not a new drug, a new understanding of a drug that we've already been giving people for 6 decades. And it means the future diabetic treatments could potentially target the neural pathway directly at far lower doses with fewer of the gastrointestinal side effects that make metformin hard for some patients to tolerate. For the roughly 500 million people living with diabetes worldwide, and for the researchers working on neurodegenerative disease, this is a door nobody even knew was there. And this lands right alongside what we covered 3 days ago, the large Lancet Psychiatry study finding that semaglutide, another metabolic drug, was simultaneously reducing psychiatric risk across mood, anxiety, and addictive pathways through mechanisms its developers never designed for. 2 of the most prescribed metabolic drugs on the planet, both revealing hidden biological conversations that were happening all along, discovered within the same week. The tools for understanding biology are finally sensitive enough to catch what was always there. Okay, many new releases today, but a couple quick ones that we're going to talk about here. Anthropic launched Auto Mode for Claude Code, and that's their coding agent, which now evaluates each action before running it and automatically proceeds on safe ones while also blocking risky ones, including any prompt injection attempts. So if something is flagged, it stops and it asks you. NVIDIA released Proteina Complexa, which is a generative model that co-designs protein structures, backbones, side chains, and amino acid sequence all at once, and it's been validated at million scale across 127 different oncology targets with Manifold Bio. Protein design moving from sequence first to simultaneous whole structure generation. That's a big deal. Figma opened its canvas to AI agents via a new MCP tool, which means Claude, Cursor, GitHub, Copilot, and all of those can now directly read and edit your Figma designs, create components, and apply design tokens. So your design files just became writable by intelligent systems if you use Figma. And both OpenAI and Google launched competing commerce integrations. OpenAI through what it calls the agentic commerce protocol with both Walmart and Etsy, and Google with Gap brands through Gemini. This lets you browse, compare, and buy products without leaving the AI interface. Shopping is migrating onto the conversation layer. Now here's what I'll remember from today. A federal judge couldn't get a straight answer for why the defense secretary posted an order he now admits has no legal force. A $1 billion deal dissolved in 3 months because the compute it consumed was needed for things that actually compound. A company that designed 3 chips for every human alive decided that designing wasn't enough anymore, and a pill that 150 million Americans refill every year turned out to have been whispering to their brains at doses nobody thought to test. The through line isn't that everything is accelerating. You already know that. It's that the structures built for the previous era keep encountering the same moment of failure. A social media platform can't contain generative capability. A procurement label designed for foreign adversaries can't contain a domestic values dispute. A liver-focused pharmacology can't contain a drug that turns out to operate in the brain. The containers break because what's inside them has changed. And what matters now, what the courtroom and the chip fab and the Baylor lab are all building toward, each in their own domain, are containers that fit what's actually emerging. Very soon, watch for Judge Rita Lynn's ruling. Watch for which AI organizations learn from Sora's collapse and redirect their own compute. And watch for whether ARM's efficiency claims survive contact with production scale deployment. The answers are days away, not years. We'll see you tomorrow.